I'm also very appreciative of the three organizations who've helped bring them here. The Goethe Institute has helped bring Ruth across. Veneta, who you've not been introduced to so far. Veneta Bullen is from The Guardian, and the British Council has very kindly supported her visit, as well as Richard Billingham's, and Patrick Witty, the international picture editor of Time magazine. It's the American Center that supported his trip here. What we're hoping with all of them is that this will be the beginning of several things we hope to do over a period of time, during which we will strengthen the capacity of picture editing in Bangladesh. We will work with magazines and newspapers, help set up picture desks, train photo editors, because what we find is while we've trained photographers, they get very frustrated because at the end of the day, they're dealing with people who have no understanding of the medium. So A, the best pictures are not being used, pictures are not being used intelligently, they're not being utilized to the best effect. Ruth very kindly has brought some facts and figures. She's translated them from German, so thank you for that. We'll start with some raw data, but then I'm going to take pretty much a back seat and leave it up to these three very fine professionals to discuss with us the present day realities of the industry from the picture editor's point of view, but also give us a guidance in terms of where we might go, and to an extent what we need to do to ensure that picture desks exist and operate in a different space. We did something very interesting several years back. Nicola Robbers from NRC Handelsblad and M magazine in the Netherlands, she came over many years ago and we set up what we called a virtual picture desk in the Daily Star newspaper. So we literally set up a picture desk and people worked there. It was over a week and we were able to transform how that newspaper looks over that period of time. But it's faded again, and I'm hoping that with the injection of these professionals, we'll get back to it. So, Ruth, it's yours, and then we'll ad-lib.
Okay, this is about papers, and this is about, you know, that, for example, in America, a lot of newspapers are falling down, right? So I thought this is interesting because you can't hear me? Okay, this chart is about papers. It's not about magazines, but still, I think it's very, very interesting to read because in America, a lot of papers are closed now, and whatever America does, Germany is going to follow very soon. So this is very scary for us, definitely. But the good news is, as we are in Bangladesh here, we have to look at the entire world, and in the entire world it looks totally different. Maybe if you put this chart a little bit up, you can see, no, it's fine. You can see that, you know, I mean, most circulations of newspapers are totally increasing. So there's, you know, a high demand apparently of information here in these countries, in Asia, in Africa, etc. It's all plus. It doesn't mean that in Europe and America there's no information. As we will certainly talk about, this is going into the internet and on tablet computers, etc. But so what this means, and this can only underline what you just said, there's a large demand not only in text information, of course, but in photo information. And for that reason, you certainly need, you know, people who know about this business and know how to bring good and informative images into the papers. So I thought that is pretty interesting.
Another thing I need to mention is that Veneta Bullen over there from The Guardian also happens to be the chairperson of the Picture Researchers Association. So she brings in another feature which is very much an integral part of our profession. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about picture editing and the association and take it from there.
Okay, Veneta Bullen, and I am both a photo editor at The Guardian and I'm also the chairperson of an association of picture researchers. The Picture Research Association actually was founded about 30 years ago, and it has continued to promote and recognise our profession, because one of the things, I don't know if it exists in America and I don't know if it exists in Germany, but for sure in England, photo editing was always considered to be something that people did as a means of an enjoyment. It was never really identified as a pure skill. And it's only in the last 10 years, with the work that we have done at the Picture Research Association, to actually push those skills and for people to be really recognised. But having said that, a lot of the problems we have in the United Kingdom is a large proportion of the companies that are producing magazines, newspapers and books are all trying to cut corners, are all trying to save money. And as a result of that, it's closed a lot of the picture research departments. But nevertheless, the skills of a picture researcher and a photo editor are still required. But most of us now work in isolation. Since the coming of the digital age, a lot of us work online and work, in a virtual situation. However, that said, newspapers cannot exist without having staff at the desk. And similarly with magazines, because the ongoing schedules, you have to be there. But in book publishing, you find the large proportion of people who do their jobs do them outside in their own homes. In terms of photo editing, well, it's very difficult to actually sit down and really explain to somebody how to photo edit, because a lot of it is reliant upon the text that you have, the nature of the story that you're illustrating, and looking for the content and fitting it into the page layout and all kinds of elements like that. You can't be a photo editor overnight, and I don't think you can be a photo researcher overnight. It takes a number of years. You have either got a natural skill or you haven't. If you have that natural skill, of course you will learn quite quickly. But if you haven't got that immediate natural skill, it does take, I would say, at least a good 6 months to understand. With photo editing, there are other facets of the work as well. I mean, it depends how on tap you have to be within the department where you work. Some people require you to have Photoshop skills, some don't, because in some departments there's sort of levels and tiers of who does that particular type of work.
My name is Patrick Witty. I'm the international photo editor at Time magazine, but before Time, I was at the New York Times, so I have a lot of newspaper experience as well. And looking at what you showed, it's interesting that newspapers are closing, and in fact, one newspaper that closed in the United States was the Rocky Mountain News, which was one of the most visually literate newspapers in the country. Amazing photographers have gone through there. They've won 2 Pulitzer Prizes, some of the smartest picture editors and director of photography in the business, yet they closed. So not to be like doom and gloom, but that's like the sad reality of what's happening, at least in the United States. And yes, circulation has dropped, but readership has grown. The readership, however, is online. The reason that newspapers are failing and magazines are closing is that it costs an enormous amount of money to print and distribute. Now, printing and distributing a magazine, as much as we love the actual holding the newspaper and the magazine, that's the most expensive part. Creating the content, sending photographers across the world, that's cheap comparing to printing and sending out a magazine or newspaper. But again, like, the good part is that this is the future, is going to be online. It's going to be in tablets. And that's where I think we have to really concentrate. The problem is it's hard to make money that way. Like, online advertising is peanuts. It's not going to support a 1,200 person newsroom at the New York Times. they built a paywall. They have the ability to do that, which is good, and it seems to be working, which is good news. But it's interesting that circulation is rising in areas where I really doubt they have picture editors, meaning South America, parts of Africa. And that's where the visual literacy of a newsroom is incredibly important, and why our jobs actually matter. If you have copy editors or news designers choosing photographs, no one's going to win in that situation whatsoever. And that's clear. All you have to do is pick up a paper in most cities, and you look at the picture at the top, and it's kind of a joke.
But I just wanted to bring something in. Michelle Stevenson, did you overlap with her?
No, she left before I got.
Okay. Yeah, I know, but I was just wondering whether
I know her. Yeah, she's great.
So Michelle Stevenson used to be the picture editor of Time magazine, and I remember sitting in her office once. She says, "Sit down, just do what you want. I've got a meeting." So she goes into a meeting with the editor and the art director, and when she's back, she's in tears because she says, "You know, I failed." She had been fighting for a particular picture to be given a particular space in the magazine because she loved that picture. She knew the value of the work. She wanted the picture to be used in a particular way, and she wasn't, in that particular case, able to convince the rest of the team to give it the play that was needed. And she felt that she had let the photographer down. But for me, what was touching was the fact that it moved her so much. She felt that she needed to fight for that picture photographer in that newsroom, that was her job, that picture be used to the best effect. And it moved her to tears. We don't always recognize that that's a role that a picture editor takes on. Having taken pictures, you don't do it, no?
Yeah, of course.
There you are. So, but the thing is, as
do you cry? Does it ever get you more pages?
No, but
what I do is
okay, I want to add something.
I ask for more. Like I'll ask for 12, and if I get 8, it's great.
Okay.
And I cry when I get 4, but it's all right.
It's not only about space. I mean, he said it's one particular picture, and I understand that perfectly. And I did cry already, yes. But I went to the ladies' room before I did it. But what we do on a regular basis, actually, we bang doors. And we say, I'm going to withdraw my name from the masthead. So I think this is very important to do, to get your foot down. Sorry.
One of the main things we do as picture editors is we are your liaison in the newsroom. I mean, you're in the field, you're sending us work. We protect your work and we protect you. We protect the investment you've made and the risks you've taken. You know, it's especially now, and all the photographers I work with are all over the world, so when they send me pictures, they trust me to look after them. And not only to look after the photographer in the field and make sure they're safe and taken care of, but also to take care of their baby, which is the picture in the magazine.
And that, I don't think, is sufficiently understood. Yeah. And one of the things I'm hoping might happen through this, and perhaps that we'll be able to influence our media sufficiently to recognize that they have a role. And at the end of the day, photographers are helpless. You do the best work that you can, and then we hand over our baby to you. You're the midwives. Then don't really have
I'm like more of a wet nurse.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, breastfeeding I'm not too hot on right now, but we'll work on it. But
yes, well, we are the caretakers of the work of the photographers, and we do fight, and sometimes we do end up, you know, sort of struggling and in tears, because in some ways we know what is right. Visually, we know that image is illustrating what we consider to be the correct text. So I mean, if you look at any picture, it should really have that visual literacy that you don't have to then look at the bottom and read some extended caption. It should have a certain amount of impact. Okay, you will put pictures in sometimes to just fill a page, but I don't agree with that. My philosophy in terms of picture editing is it's got to look at as what it is that you're actually reading or talking about on the paper or on the page. So that's my side of things.
Yeah.
Between a news,
You know, editing at time, it's interesting because coming from the New York Times, it's a daily newspaper, obviously. So editing for news is it's almost easier in some ways because the shelf life is only the next day. So if there's a flood, or like the fire in Brazil, for instance, this is a good example. The disco fire in Brazil yesterday. You know, the New York Times, I'm sure, I haven't seen the paper today, but I'm sure they ran a picture from the scene. You know, if we covered that in time, you have to remember, we close on a Wednesday. The magazine's not even on newsstands until Friday and not in subscribers' hands until Saturday. So the picture we use hopefully can resonate beyond just a news photograph, which is sometimes why I choose a little less literal photographs and pictures that maybe be a little more lyrical or interesting or creative, because they've already seen the news photograph. It's been all over Twitter, it's been all over Facebook, it's been all over the websites. So you have to, editing for a weekly at least, you have to edit a little more smartly, I guess, or more, it's more essayistic, I think.
I would definitely endorse that. If you're working on a magazine, in most cases, the article, if you are taking up an article of a very sort of large news story, you've really got to, first of all, look at what everybody else has put out. That's the most important thing about our jobs, is that every day, without fail, you have to flick through everybody's newspapers and whatever magazines are being printed in your country and outside, to look to see what other visuals are being used. So, I mean, for me, the most important thing is I don't want to use the same picture, and I fight tooth and nail, and sometimes I do get my own way. I don't want to use what somebody else has used. I want to use something different, but something with the same impact. So from that point of view, yes, when you are working on a news article, but in a sense you're old news because you're on a newspaper, you've really, really got to sit down and think, you know, logically about what impact this picture is going to give. Will it give the same impact? Will it still have that same newsworthy element to it? And of course, a lot of that is also in the text as well, because it's written in such a way that it's post the event.
Okay, I just want to add something as a reader, actually, because we are monthly magazines, so we definitely do not do anything about that fire. But when something like this happens, I also check, you know, all the images on the internet that for everybody, not, you know, particularly as a photo editor, but I look at Spiegel Online, Stern Online, etc., and I see all these images from this incredible incident. But then, if Stern, normally they do that, they make like 5 double spreads. And then actually I really understand what is going on, because I have, you know, when I look at the internet, it goes like bang, 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 and very quickly. And it only stays in my head, really, unless it's something really special. But it only stays in my head when I have it printed, seen printed, you know, in Stern magazine or something similar to.
Take the opportunity. I mean, you prompted me about something I should have said earlier. We are being live streamed, so wave to all the people out there, so they're watching. Say hello to your mum and whatever. But more importantly, tweet, put it on social media, let people know that this event is taking place. You have fantastic people here talking right now, and you will have throughout. So make sure that the wider audience gets engaged with this. The website where they can see it is, there are 3 sites: dhrik.tv, chobimala.org, which I'm sure you all know about, and dhriknews.com. All 3 sites are streaming this as we speak. So do let other people know.
Okay, something is still bugging my mind. I want to answer to something Patrick said earlier, if you don't mind. You said it's cheaper to be online, right? That's what you said. And this is a big, big mistake. Okay, first of all, if you do something online, you need all this technology. You need this incredible server, material, etc. If you put out, for example, a magazine as an app, as we are doing right now, we start this, it is not less expensive because we have to give 30% to Apple, you know, and then to, you know, to do all this electronic stuff, to make it beautiful, etc. It's exactly the same price as we do a distribution through a printed magazine. Plus, a lot of people are concerned about the environmental issues. Okay, you have to cut trees to get paper, but there's more and more recycling, you know, very more sophisticated than it ever was before. And for the servers, I mean, you know that in Sweden they have, you know, underground, I mean, incredible areas, and they have to be cooled, and, you know, I mean, this is an enormous energy what's going into this process, and an enormous kind of money. So, you know, I don't want to give my plea here for printed paper, but I mean, financially, to produce it, there's really no difference. So I just wanted to make that clear.
With your circulation, it may be on a monthly basis, but for a daily newspaper and a weekly magazine, you know, when we don't print, that's actually when time is more profitable. It's interesting. I mean, at least with time.
Well, it's interesting here in Bangladesh because with the major circulations, the face value of a newspaper is substantially less than the cost of the paper to produce it on in Bangladesh. And the newsprint business is actually a bigger business than the newspaper business, which is quite interesting. So up till a certain point, if circulation goes up, the newspaper actually makes less money than if it is below a certain level. But of course, it affects advertising, and it's not always in sync, so there are many complex equations to take place. I'd just like to move a little bit to Veneta for a different reason. You are also a picture researcher. That's not something we're very familiar with. Could you give us a little bit of a background on that?
Well, picture researching is a very, very wide profession. Okay, picture researching is basically a very, very wide role that you have with a number of clients. And if you're on a magazine and you've got plenty of articles that you have to illustrate, you can't necessarily find those images from the pool of material that comes in to your desktop. And when you're working on a newspaper, I don't know about magazine, in a newspaper you can get up to 5,000 images coming in a day, and it's almost impossible to, and you have to, but it's almost impossible to edit all those out. But having said that, when you're working on a subject matter that has no newsworthy to it, because newspapers don't just do news, they do features and articles, and magazines do features and articles. So therefore you're given a brief, and the brief could be from anything. It can be from architecture through to mothers and babies, to science, to history, to natural history. I recently did a book on a big book, an atlas of the oceans, which was looking at the oceans from an ecological point of view, and as to how our planet is being affected, you know, from the various sort of elements that are occurring. And that to me was the biggest challenge, because I had to find images from all over the world, literally. You do turn to the internet in some respects, but what you do also rely upon, which I don't think you have here, is photo agencies. And in England, I think, or United Kingdom, sorry, I think that we probably have, I'd say about 2, maybe 3,000 photo agencies, all specialising in specific subjects. So you've got to know who has what, or try and find out who has what if you're not sure. But in most cases, when you've been doing this job for a number of years, you tend to know who to go to. So say, for instance, you're doing a book on film, you would go to a specialist film agency and you would look for film stills. With that comes another element. You have to negotiate fees. You have, in some cases, your company might have in-house fee scales. If not, you have to negotiate fees. You have to know about fees. You have to know about the rights, and the rights being, is it print? Is it magazine? Is it newspaper? Is it a book? That's print. And sometimes you can work on a TV program, so you have to know about films, film rights. So all that is that's a big sort of area that you have to acquire a certain amount of knowledge. You have to know what kind of fees, because you'd work to a budget that your publisher or your editor or whoever, company has assigned you. So yes, there's a huge amount of skill required in being a picture researcher, and I'm happy and I'm fortunate to be able to combine both, and have been able to combine both. But if I could actually just go back to what you were talking about earlier, and somewhat throw a cat amongst the pigeons, and I know in the United Kingdom that the decline, I've seen a serious decline of newspapers. And I started my career in the newspapers. As a matter of fact, I actually started working on the Times, on the picture desk. And it was one of the most exciting times for us, because there was money. We could assign photographers to go to all parts of the world and bring back. I mean, we used to do these things called special reports. They were in the newspaper, and we used to assign a photographer, to go to India, go to Africa, and come back with the material. Those days have gone, because the newspapers now, most of them are not assigning photographers. Photographers go out and do, I don't know if it happens in America, but photographers go out and they shoot, but not being paid to produce the material. They are paid on page rate. So even though they're given a story to go and photograph, it may not necessarily mean, if that doesn't make it to the newspaper, that they actually don't get paid. They just get paid a very nominal fee. So, well, but that's how a lot of the newspapers are working in the United Kingdom. And I think one of the things that has really been, the most negative influence on newspapers in the United Kingdom are all these free newspapers. I mean, you get on the train every morning and you very rarely see anybody reading an actual newspaper where they've paid for it. So yes, there is that decline. But I seriously believe, and maybe I'm old school in this thought, that after a while people will be bored with their, flicking through their iPad or their iPhone. I think there will come a time when, or maybe I'm old school. I'd like to think that there's nothing nicer than flicking through a book. I don't want to read a book on my iPad. I don't want to read it on my iPhone. I actually do like the feel of the newspaper. So as I say, maybe I'm old school, maybe I'm living in a fool's paradise.
I want to ask Shahidul something about that. With the free newspapers, generally at least in the States, the free newspaper, and even other newspapers, they subscribe to wire services. And I want to ask you this, Shahidul. The quality of the wire service photographer in the last 10 years is outstanding, how it's changed. And it's changed the freelance market, and I think whether it's ultimately hurt or helped photographers, I don't know. But why would why would the Guardian send someone on assignment to Syria when the AP, the AFP, Getty Images, Reuters? Oh, right. But even internationally, like they're picking up great work from Syria. I mean, great work, and that work is being shot on spec for wires. I mean, I would never do that. I've published pictures from the wires from Syria for sure, but you have to weigh the risk, the news hole, etc. But you know, wire photographers today, you know, a wire photographer like 15 years ago, that's almost an insult. Today, I mean, the wire photographers are amazing. I mean, do photographers agree with that? Really? I mean, what do you think?
Question was directed at me initially, so I can say, well, we have with EPA, we have Abir Abdullah, we have with AFP, Munir Zaman, who just got nominated for that Pulitzer the other day. With Reuters, we have Andrew Biraj, and who's Ahad has just joined AP, right? So we've actually got Pathshala students in all 4 wires working here. So that's quite exciting, but they're all very good photographers. Not only are they good photographers, I think the thing is there's another shift where wire photographers used to be only about spot news, only about things as they happen. Now they're doing features, they're doing in-depth stuff. Some of these photographers are doing personal long-time stories, and they're getting used. Where there is a difference, however, is these are 4 individuals covering a nation of 160 million. Yeah? So there's no way they can move away from the hot news, move away from where the action is, and photograph something more in-depth, something outside. And one of the problems, certainly in Bangladesh, and I suspect it might be elsewhere, is that the media caters only for the urban elite to a large extent. Those are their stakeholders. The rural population is completely neglected. And one of the things we've started doing now is it's a network called Rural Visual Journalist Network. We're doing it with World Press. We've actually got rural correspondents with iPhones doing multimedia pieces, sending regular reports from rural Bangladesh. And that is very, very interesting, and it'll change the dynamics, I think.
Okay, I think what you said is totally right. I mean, the newswire photographers are incredibly good these days. It's true. I don't know. Maybe you want me to tell you a little bit how different we work at GEO. I know that you have wire service. You have wire service. My friends at Stern Magazine have wire service, meaning every hour there are 10,000 pictures, you know, coming in. And what you are as a photo researcher, photo editor, is very much also to just, you know, look at everything and say, this is bad, this is good, you know, like a policeman, this goes left, this goes right, right? Okay, this is not the way we work at GEO. It is much more difficult, to be honest, because we are actively looking at everything and searching. And we don't have any photo researcher. Our photo editors do the research, so it's one profession. It's the same? Yeah. Okay, so if you have a story, what we do, we assign early on the story to one photo editor. Or if we have like a special issue, I showed you yesterday all the stuff we are putting out, one photo editor is in charge of the entire issue. And what they do, they have to, if it's a story on, I don't know, the fantasy of children, as I explained yesterday. So the photo editor does the research. And what he does or she does, she looks at a lot of websites. Of course, she also looks at agencies. And in Germany, we have this thing, I don't know if you have that, it's called Picture Max, and it combines a couple, I mean, many agencies on one website. So you give one keyword, and then you look at a choice of images from Focus Agency, Live, Magnum, you know, I mean, it's all combined in one platform. I don't know if you have that. So this is easy, but what we want different pictures. We do not want images that even if it's only research, we don't want them from, you know, what everybody can have. So what we do, we have many bookmarks, and we always look at, for example, here the festival, here who was a photographer who was there. We look at the website of this particular photographer. We look at awards, and if we don't know the name of the person, we check out the website, etc. So, you know, we are always kind of cherry picking. And it's very active. And actually, it's great. It's a lot of fun. It's a wonderful profession. So I can only recommend to be a photo editor. And the same photo editor who does this kind of research for a story that is not possible to photograph it, also takes care of a photographer if a photographer is assigned to a story. So if we do something on, I don't know, a city portrait of Calcutta, just, you know, to say something, a photo editor accompanies the photographer all the way, you know, doing the research, you know, if there's a problem on the way, you know, the photo editor is always there to help, etc. This is actually changing a little bit because most of the photographers now we assign are already on location, which is a big advantage. So, for example, I'm just looking at Jody. If we assign Jody to do a story in South Africa, maybe a portrait series or something, she knows much better than our photo editor. We just can give her the idea what we want, the brief, of course, but then Jody, you know, she knows very much better than the photo editor where to go and what to do. And well, that's the way we work.
Okay, well, we have a similar system of receiving images from a whole bunch of photo agencies, but so does everybody else on the newspapers and the magazines. I mean, when you're working on a newspaper, time is of the essence. You don't have time to go looking elsewhere. You have to rely upon the imagery that feeds in either from a news agency or Wire or any of those. You just don't have the time. But if you want to go outside the box at something that's not newsworthy, obviously you can turn to this particular website. I'm sorry, it's just name is just forgotten, but I think it's called When or something like that. But that that's quite new to the United Kingdom, and it has quite taken on. But my theory is that's the easy way of selecting a picture, and I try to challenge that because I want something different. I mean, that's my philosophy in terms of picture editing, is not just to take, you know, the first available image, is to find something that really is indicative of what you want to visually illustrate. But yeah, that's basically a system that works in the United Kingdom.
Well, I would like to take it to you for a different, just to move it slightly differently. There's a mixed audience here from various areas, but most of them are photographers. What would you, I mean, you are the people we rely upon to sell our work, to use our work well, and while we all need to make a living, there's nothing as nice as seeing your work well used in whatever publication there is. With these shifts taking place, both in terms of how many pictures are being used, how they're being used, what the end product might be for viewership, and the changing prices, do you have an advice for photographers? Do you want them to be different? Do you look for something different? Do they have to change in some way to adapt to the changes that are affecting you?
I mean, I guess one piece of advice I would say is to not chase the news. I mean, because you're going to lose. You can't beat the wires. And so the answer is don't try. The answer is to do, I think it really boils down to really personal projects that have a newsworthiness. Personal projects, I think, can shape your aesthetic, which is hugely important. But personal projects that also are pegged off the news, at least for me, selfishly, are what I look for. You know, I had a story in Venezuela about violence in the slums, and it wasn't a big enough story that I could commission, but it was a big enough story that I didn't want to use a wire for it. And I just started looking, and I found this photographer, never heard of him before. Oscar Castillo is his name, and I used several of his pictures. We did a big piece online, and he made a lot of money off of it, and no one had seen it or heard of him before, and it looked beautiful. This was part of a personal project he was doing. He'd spent a lot of time on it. When I buy it, it's not exclusive to Time. He can sell it the next week. I don't buy him out. Like, exclusivity for me on assignment work is crucial, but on pickup work it's not, and that's where the photographer wins, and that's what I would suggest you do.
Actually, for us, if we buy a story, we buy German rights, and we keep them for 18 months, and they are not allowed to publish it in Germany within that
even
frame.
If it's space rate? Like
No, we pay a guarantee.
Oh,
A guarantee which is much, much higher than the space rate, yes.
Yeah,
But
no, we don't
the
do that.
photographer can sell it elsewhere, but not in the German-speaking market.
Well, whenever you're on assignment for Time, there is an embargo after it's published, and that's the difference. But on we call it pickup. Whenever you pick up a picture from a photographer, it's no, we don't own the copyright. You do, and you can sell it the next week. I'd prefer you didn't, but and if you do, I'll remember it. But yeah, well, they can't sell it to Newsweek now, so that's okay. So sorry, that was mean. No, we do not have staff photographers. No, we have contract photographers, which all that means is that we have a long relationship with them. They make a higher day rate, a couple of contractual things, but yeah, no staff.
A similar situation exists in the newspapers and magazines in England. Well, mainly the newspapers, not so much the magazines, where they're staff photographers, and they some of them staff as paid a wage, and some are contract where they're paid on assignment. But the copyright of their photos remain with the company that has assigned them to do the work. But then there's a system that exists at, particularly in The Guardian and lots of the other big newspapers, where they have a database, and that database it's an internal database. It's locked to anybody outside. You can't access it at all. But you can search the database, and you can use it within the organisation, because most companies that are producing newspapers are huge organisations, and they've got lots of other enterprises going on. So within the group, you can use the image, but you pay a set price, and that's organised, obviously by a department that is another department within the organisation. But getting back to the photographers, and really, where are you going to sell your images? Well, that's a kind of a slight million-dollar question. It's you've got to find the right vehicle that suits you and suits your work. And once you've found it, and you've had your work published, and other people see it, that's really when the ball starts to move. And the more you can get your work exhibited or published is really the way you will really start to see your income improving. Also, I would say relationships with photo editors are very important. If you're too precious, sometimes we'll accept that, but sometimes it can be a pain in the neck, and I'm not saying it will turn us away from you, but it makes it harder for us to deal with certain elements of the work that we're sitting down and looking at. And I'm not saying that we would personalize any of it. I'm just saying that we have a busy day, and the last thing we need is somebody really getting inside our head. So I'd say forge really good relationships with your photo editors or your art directors. Once you have that kind of relationship, you'll find that work will start to pick up.
I'd just like to add to what Patrick was saying before going on to Ruth, because he mentioned personal projects moving away from news, but there is another way of doing it, and that is being predictive about news. There are things that you know will happen at a particular time where you have a lot. It doesn't need to be spot news. You know that there are certain particular days where certain things will take place. I mean, we know, for instance, a year from now there will be an election in Bangladesh. There's a whole lot of things that will happen as a lead up to those elections, as a follow up to that. So someone who's done good, solid research and worked it all out, you will be the people to answer, but I would assume that if you come up with a really good story which has all the research, which has the contacts, where you know there's even a text to go with the pictures, it's a lot easier to move with it. Then even if you have a good idea, then you commission a photographer, you need to look for the text, you need to validate it and things like that. If we've done our research and our homework, it makes it much easier at the other end. And I'm now, for instance, working with Trila on a project where I know that on the 12th of June this year, there will be a particular event of significance, and I am building up to that time, and I've been doing a lot of groundwork before then, knowing that that is my day, if you like. So there could be other ways, I suppose.
Okay, I totally agree to this. What you said, what Patrick said. My advice also is to do personal projects. But if you want to sell them, you should not base them on yourself. You should actually look for something that you just said, Shahidul just said, something of interest for a lot of people, if you want to make money with it. And I'm just want to tell you from my really long time career how this entire thing has changed. At the beginning of Geo, I said that already in some other connection here, we sent photographers from Germany, England, America, France to every corner of the world. And basically it was a writer, it was always a writer and a photographer who went together, and basically it was always the writer who was giving the direction of the story. And the photographer was more or less, running behind him, looking, if he could make a couple of pictures, etc. I mean, maybe I simplify it a little bit, but basically this is what it was. So the smart guy was the writer, and the photographer was hanging on. So now this has so incredibly, completely changed. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on all your photographer, I know that. But what you're doing is just wonderful. I mean, really great. And what we do, we buy a lot of the projects you have already done or have already started. What we do a lot, when you have a project which is half done, we send you back. And then we ask you to take the writer on. And then, it's just wonderful for us. For example, our writer wouldn't even have thought about doing this kind of story. He wouldn't get into as much as you as a photographer can. And I mean, he has like the red carpet. I mean, everything is there. You have done the research, etc. Yesterday we saw a couple of pictures from Lu Guang, that orphan story we mentioned. I mean, no, the words that go with it. I can see that on a daily basis. A lot of photographers come in with wonderful multimedia pieces, and they have done the interview, and they have cut the words, and they are in charge. Writers also, I mean, they go into this area and they also do it, but they have one bad choice. They cannot do good photographs, so they need you. So I think this is an area, and this is a very good future I see for photography.
Yeah, please. And then once you've done that, we'll open it up to questions, yeah?
If I could just add to what Ruth had to say, I think also in terms of commissioning, the most important thing when you're commissioning a photographer is a brief. You've got to brief them properly. If you don't brief them properly, you will end up with basically not the pictures that you anticipated. The second thing I think that's very important is photographers need to have a website with a collection of images up on the website that gives us as an indication of the work that you're producing. Now, you would look for those kind of photographers when your little sort of, invariably we have a chosen set of photographers that we use within our remits of our jobs. But we often have to go outside the box. I mean, I had the experience of producing some magazines for what's known as Education UK, which is part of the British Council in the United Kingdom. And that covers India, Pakistan, Africa. And I needed to find photographers in these areas. I didn't know anybody that photographed there. And when I spoke to our photo editor at The Guardian, he said to me, we'll just go to Getty or go to AP. Well, I didn't have that kind of money, so I had to do my own research and find a photographer in Pakistan. I had to look up on the website. I had to see where the city was in terms of how far he needed to be from A to B in terms of what it was going to cost, in terms of his travel time. And then I had to go through a whole sort of remit of portfolios to try and find the correct photographer that would actually produce the work that I required. And what we were doing at that point, we were photographing a very prominent TV broadcaster in, he lived in Islamabad. I couldn't find a photographer that I felt was correct for our magazine at the time that would give me back the material I wanted. So I ended up having to find a photographer in Pakistan and then negotiate a fee with him for his travel time and things like that. And the work that he sent back was I was so pleased. I was so happy with it. But it is a trial. You know, you sit there thinking, oh my God, you know, have I given him the right instructions? Is he working to my brief? And in that case, he did. And in most cases, the bigger the brief, the better for you. And if you're not sure, if you're being commissioned to do something and you find that your brief is a little bit vague, just go back to the photo editor. They really don't mind discussing things with you. So that's my tip.
Yes, please. Questions. Srila.
Thank you very much to Shahidul and the panel for organizing this discussion. What I suppose is missing for me here is, in this room, do we have any news editors? Do we have any picture editors? Oh, okay. My question is back to the panel, but I just wanted to know that since this discussion had been organized and well publicized, whether any of the media that we are trying to influence, and when I say we, the British Council is working with Shahidul and Drick over a period of time to change culture, to bring about cultural change. That's what we want to see. I was pretty well horrified, really, with the picture that appeared in the Daily Star to, as it were, announce the opening of Chobi Mela, because there was a great opportunity to use fantastic images. And I would really like it if we could have one-day ban of having that classic photograph of the panel. You know, just a kind of detox day. I would really appreciate it, because I'm sick of opening the paper. I am Bengali, but my Bangla is too poor, so I cannot read the hundreds of papers that arrive in our offices. So I always read the Daily Star every day. and that same kind of lazy format of photography is such a turn-off. But anyway, my question, those were my comments. My question, one to Veneta and one to Patrick. Veneta, do you have to be a photographer to be a picture researcher or a photo editor? What's the route into the profession? And to Patrick, since you run one of my favorite magazines, and of course, so much discussion is always about who's on the cover of Time magazine, what is your favorite image of the cover?
Okay, no, you do not need to be a photographer to be a photo editor. Some photographers that just find it very difficult to basically cut a living from photography alone in the United Kingdom do turn to photo desks. But no, you do not need to be a photographer. But you do not need to be a photographer to be a photo editor. What you do need to know is about photography. I mean, my experience in photography started when I was 7 years of age. My father was a photographer too. He took me into the darkroom. I learned how to process film. I learned how to print. I learned from what's known as grassroots. And all through my working career, I've embraced every new step of the advancement of this profession in terms of, digital technology. I always keep abreast of courses. We work now in the United Kingdom on InDesign. That was another technology I had to work with. Photoshop, all of those. They're good assets to have. You don't have to have them, but by God, it really does help you in terms of your career.
No, you don't have to be a photographer to be a photo editor. In fact, I think one of the most well-known and well-renowned photo editors who will remain nameless will admit she's a terrible photographer. So it doesn't matter, but you do have to have a visual intelligence, and among other things, which is kind of hard to teach photo editing because everyone comes at it from different paths. I think the worst path you can come from is a photographer who becomes a photo editor who thinks they should be a photographer. That is the worst, and photographers don't like working with them, and editors don't like working with them either. If they're constantly second guessing the photographer, it's not what we do. And if a photo editor ever does that to you, they're a bad photo editor. So my favorite cover is pretty easy because the author is sitting right there, Jody Bieber. It's our cover. I know. Well, if Nadav Kander was here, I would say it was the Obama cover. But really, no, Jody's cover is one of my most favorite from 2010 of Aisha. Start to finish, it was an amazing journey, and the journey still goes on in some ways. Otherwise, the covers we did from Syria this year that I'll show later, they've meant the most to me by far.
On from Sheila's question. There's a question there? Yeah, please.
Patrick, you were talking about the wire photographers and how good they are nowadays. I have a particular question. It's not a question, it's a reflection. When I look at work of Don Macklin or Philip Jones Griffith, the old photographers who have been to conflict and come up with the really amazing black and white photographs, which for me at least, which is more than news, and it has a certain kind of human warmth that I can look for maybe 50 years. And even now today, when I look at work of either Philip Blenkinsop or Paolo Pellegrini or Stanley Green, there is something special, It's not only about covering the news and having all the details and making it compact so you can put in the cover of the news, cover the newspaper. So I was just wondering, how do you see, what are the transition in last 20, 30 years in photography?
That's really difficult to answer, but part of what I'm going to show later will explain this, in that, yeah, wire photographers are great, but when I show you what I show later of what Yuri Kozyrev did in the Arab Spring, you'll see why one photographer's voice really does matter, and that is Yuri's. I mean, I could have, the entire year during the Arab Spring, ran great wire pictures from John Moore to Daniel Berulak to Gutenfeld. I mean, everybody, they did great work. But when you see later the singular vision that Yuri created throughout all of these different countries he went to over this huge amount of travel and time, you'll see the difference. And that is the difference you're talking about with Philip Jones Griffiths and you know, Don McCullen. I mean, I think Yuri is the modern day, what you're talking about, that does transcend wire photography. When I mean like wire photographers, you know, it's mostly one-off, but that one-off is a really strong picture. I mean, to me, it takes more and to have meaningful work, and I think Yuri did that during the Arab Spring, and I think that 20 years from now, when people are talking about the Arab Spring, they'll look back at Yuri's work as a really definitive guide of what happened. Does that make any sense? I mean,
yeah, one way, but because you know, like here is Abir is sitting. He was my teacher when I was student. I have grown up looking at his pictures that he have taken of war veteran in Bangladesh. Then he joined EPA, and he started producing pictures for the news agencies like EPA. And that's great, but I still miss what he have done 10 years back, because I think that will survive for a long time, and it has a very different kind of feeling. But at the same time, you have to survive in a country like Bangladesh, where we don't have much assignments, and we have too many good photographers coming from different places and also here. So
well, I think that's important. You know, I've had I rarely commission wire photographers. Every once in a while, like just a couple weeks ago, I hired Oded Belilti, who's an AP photographer based in Jerusalem, who's amazing. I commissioned him for an assignment just for time, and he did great. But they still, when they come through New York, they usually come in the office because we know their names and we see their work so much that we rarely get to see them in person. So, but when they come in, they generally show me work they're doing on the side, their personal projects, which is always outstanding. So I would only suggest, I mean, you have to keep at your personal projects. Even if you work for a wire day in and day out, I know it's hard, but it's crucial.
Just what you were saying related to doing your own work. For me personally, instead of choosing something that might sell, I think it's better to choose something that has meaning for you. Because maybe you will sell that once and make some money. But I think that if you creating work consistently that has meaning for you, and it's good work, I think that there is avenues where that work will be seen. But if you're just saying, I'm going to create this because I think it will sell, I think that would be quite possibly short-lived as a photographer.
I guess you misunderstood what I said.
I don't think it was.
No,
it
no.
was just in general.
Personal work. I mean about, you know, my body and what I think, and I mean there's so much work about this very personal trip to the Yangtze River, and you only see an empty bottle in the corner, and which is definitely very, very good for that person, and maybe other people can identify with this. What I meant with personal project on a different, on an issue. It's not that, you know, you look into, is this issue going to sell? That's not what I meant. It's just that you cannot do a personal project just about you and your inner self, and then, you know, trying to sell it. So if you want to have an income through photography with personal projects, you have to do something which is interesting to other people, not, you know, necessarily something where you say from the beginning this is going to sell. So I just wanted to make that clear.
I think choosing the photographer, you know, I think it depends on their vision of things, which is why I go back to what you're talking about personal work. And I've said this over and over, that it can be about yourself, because what I learned from that is your aesthetic. And if your aesthetic is consistent and your vision is consistent, if it's a story about whatever, I'm going to understand your eye, which I think is really important. How I would choose in Bangladesh, it depends on, it depends on experience and their body of work, really. I mean, I sometimes, I'll go back to someone's work and I'll look at something and try to understand it. The topic matters, the space we're going to be using it within. I mean, there's a lot of factors that weigh into it, but overall it is that photographer's vision. And what's cool about Bangladesh is that there are many different visions here. It's not, it's not a template, which I could say about a lot of places, but I don't see it here. I've seen a lot of different kinds of work.
That's a tough question. Okay, what we try, we have like 5, 6, 7 stories in our magazine, which depends on how many advertisements we have, because if we have more advertisement, the magazine is bigger, larger, thicker, and otherwise we only have 5 stories. So 5 to 7 stories, and they have to be different in style. We need different kind of visions. Even so, when we assign the story, we don't really know where it ends up in which issue. Only when it comes in, if everything is done, the text, etc., we decide where it goes. But we also mix the issue according to, the style of photography we have. So, okay, first of all, for us, it's more and more directed or guided through the photographer, what we do. If the photographer comes up with a great idea for a story, we do it with this photographer. We would never ever say, oh, this is a great idea, we want to do that story, but this other photographer would do it better. No, we don't do that. So if a photographer suggests something, we do it with him or with her. So this is one point. If we have a story that actually came from us, from inside the editorial department, or from a writer, etc., how we pick, that is really a tough question. So what we do, sometimes it's obvious, sometimes we say, well, this would be cool for Brent Sturden because, he has done something similar, whatever. But sometimes we sit down together with a small group in the photo department and we go through a couple of names. And what we do, we know what the story is about, we think about what the pictures could eventually look like, and then we think, how would he do it, how would she do it, these kind of things. And then, somehow at the end we have to make a decision. So it's really, different each time.
What Ruth just said, whenever we go down a list of names, how would he do it, how would she do it, how would she do it, you want to be one of those people. I mean, you want to have how you do it. Like that's the vision I'm talking about. Like it's really difficult to attain, but once you attain it, then you've made it. I mean, that's great.
Did you ever think this is the
Gambling? I've made some gambles, yeah, and sometimes they've paid off, sometimes they haven't. Not every assignment works out, The goal is to, I mean, I might have an idea of what I want someone to do, and that's exactly what I don't want. Like, I want something that's going to surprise me.
Gambling is good. Gambling is good. Okay, I think...
She's got the budget to gamble.
Well, to be honest, it's an investment. I mean, an assignment for us can easily cost us $10,000 to $20,000 or euro. So this is a big investment. You really want a good result, right? I mean, but sometimes you are disappointed, and then so the story is just smaller. I mean, it's not good, but it happens. But what I think is interesting here, what the New York Times magazine does a lot, right? And what they invented, what Casey Ryan actually invented, it's cross-assigning. So you take a fashion photographer and ask him to do street photography or something like that. I think it's very interesting. It's very daring. To be honest, I wouldn't easily do it because there's always a lot of money at stake. So, you know, for me, I would feel better if I know eventually the outcome of the story. I don't know.
Thing is, when you've got a certain amount of money that you're having to spend, you can't really gamble too often. You've got to be really, you've got to have those discussions with your art editor, and I don't know if it happens at the time, but your art editor and the editor of the news. The editor of the newspaper. So, unfortunately, I think, well, you and gamble.
It's a technical question about language. Earlier you were talking about forging relationships with editors, and I'm sure photographers really try to do that. I'm from Nepal, and fortunately I speak English that you can understand. But a lot of young photographers I know back home don't have just the basic language skills to be able to reach out to a lot of people like yourselves. I'm just wondering if there are some ways that, well, I'm sure they can try to learn English, or I'm trying to understand if there are ways that you would be open to communicating with photographers who don't speak English very well. Do you use Google Translate on email, or I don't know? Are there?
I've actually one time when I was at the New York Times completed an entire assignment with a photographer all through Google Translate, and it works, but they need to learn English. I mean, sorry, it's just that's the way it is. I mean, I just even in this last week, I was dealing with an Iranian photographer who could write English, but he couldn't speak English. It didn't stop us from using the story, and it was great. And it was a huge success, and I'll show it later. But if he only spoke and wrote Farsi, I probably wouldn't have been able to publish the story, which would have been tragic.
My Hello, it's better. Okay, my answer to that would be, if the photographer has the work that you really want to commission, we live in a multicultural society, and there's always somebody in a department that speaks one language or another. So yes, I would always send an email first in English and then take Google Translate and get it to translate into the language of the person you're trying to speak to. But I know there's a few people that speak the languages that I've got Google to translate, and it's not necessarily translated literally. So from my point of view, it's really dependent upon the work, the body of work of that photographer, and if you really want him, you'll move somewhere or another to find a way to negotiate and to discuss with them. It could be that they'll even find somebody that will come on the phone and talk in a language that, I mean, we've got French-speaking, Spanish, German, Hindu. We've got all kinds of speaking languages in the department, so that wouldn't be an issue from our point of view. It would really be about the work that this person has to produce.
Hello. Yeah, just wanted to understand one particular aspect of the discussion. You mentioned about the fact that there are very few photo editors in this room. You mentioned about what you need in order to actually be a good one. what I'm thinking is, in hearing the way you're speaking, you seem to spend a lot of time looking at images, stuck to almost the computer, or perhaps spending a lot of time at the desk or something. Can you tell me something about the sexy part of the job? Is there something that will be really exciting? Because it's very difficult to find photographers or people who are attracted to the profession as much as it is difficult to find an organization willing to invest in the job of a photo editor. So what is it about, from an organizational point of view, what is it that would make the organization say, yes, we need photo editors, because that's what's made it click? And from a community point of view, it would attract people to this kind of a role. Okay, so what would make it really click?
You know, I don't think anything about picture editing is sexy, but beyond that, in a very, you know, idealistic way, you know, I have the ability to send the world's best photographers all over the world to make the best work that I then get to publish that hopefully will make a difference. I mean, that's it. It's really that simple. You know, and then also get to come to Bangladesh. So that's pretty much it.
But I was going to say exactly the same. This is the sexy bit, the coming to Bangladesh. But in terms of where I've worked, there's been some great opportunities. One of the things, I don't know about the rest of my panel here, but sometimes you can get tickets to Wimbledon. You know, you can go to Ascot and things like that. You know, when you're in the sort of news and press corps, those are sort of things that come. They don't come too often, but you get invites. And the other thing, basically, is that yes, it's really nice to be able to use the work of a photographer to put across your visual kind of thoughts and process, for it to make it literal to the public, and also to. This is an awful thing to say. I'm not saying we teach people about images. We don't, but you get a greater understanding, because years ago people would look at images and they'd just be pictures on a page. But the sexy bit is you can get sexy images, and they can have such an impact that actually you're drawn to the picture before you're actually drawn to the text. And that, to me, is a statement, is a visual statement.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree to what I forgot your name, Patrick. I'm sorry. I totally agree what Patrick said, 100%. But for me, it is sexy. And you know what? Sometimes when I look at images, for example, this happened to me recently. Thomas Monita's work on the Guano Island, I looked at the images when they came in, and my heart started beating faster. You know, it's like a knife in your heart when you see something which is so incredible and wonderful, and this is sexy, in my opinion.
Well, thank you for that question, because it also ties into what Frida was asking. Firstly, there is, yeah, you had a question. You'd like to make a comment?
Yeah, hi. I'm Terry Doherty. I'm a United Nations photo editor, and to answer the question about, I think there's one of the best things about the job is to, well, first of all, you have to understand the role. It's the added value that a photo editor can make. And the photo editor, I think up until now, we've just been exploring how a photo editor can add value to the photographer and their work, and they make the photographer look good. But part of my role is also to make the organization that I work for look good. And it's really a great confluence of energy and vision when those things come together and you make a nice product that's informative and not just whereby photos aren't just used as graphic elements, but actually as information. It lends authenticity. It lends credibility. I must admit, I'm really pleased that this forum exists within the context of this festival, and that there was also the admission that there's a need for photo editors also in Bangladesh. And because when I looked at my Facebook page this morning, the first picture I saw of the opening photo of Chobi Mela was a panel picture. And I can live with a panel picture if it tells the story, but I was shocked. And you know, there was movement in it, which, you know, sometimes that can work, but not in a static image necessarily of a panel picture. And you know, Ruth was cut off, and she was in a bad position. And it's just not something that you would want to show to the world as the opening image of a really cool and important festival on photography. So there you go. Sorry to take so much time.
Thank you for that, Sherry. In closing, I'll just round up with those 2 points, I think, because one of the things we need to recognize is here on this panel we have a person from Time Magazine, a person from The Guardian, a person from Geo, all at a very high level, top professionals. Yet we do not have a single newspaper that's prepared to even take advantage of this situation. That gives us an indication of how much they value photography, how much they value picture editing, and how important it is to them. Obviously, that's a situation. In photography, we've been able to make a difference. In picture editing, we haven't so far. They've talked about some of the things that they do, which helps us. But when Saif asked that question, I actually see it slightly differently in the sense that my reason for being a photographer is because I want to bring about a certain change. That's why I chose photography. I will choose whatever tool that works towards that particular change. I think in that case, the photo editor is playing exactly the same role. That photo editor is taking the tools available, the resources available, which in this case happens to be pictures and text, and using it to the best effect to bring about that change. We're communicators at the end of the day. We are complementary communicators who work together at the end of the day to get the desired result. And I think for me anyway, whether I took the picture or not is not as important as whether it made that change or not in the final analysis. And whatever is needed in order to do that is relevant. And as a photojournalist, I've changed my style of photography. I've changed my way in aesthetic language, the vernacular, the vocabulary are all fluid things that you play with, you change with, because some things work at certain times better than others do. And at the end of the day, I'm not married to photography. I'm married to what photography can do. And I think that is where this comes together. And I think that's what makes this combination powerful. And that is why I would like other people to consider, if you happen to be in a position where you have the strength through your imagery, through a use of imagery, to influence people, that, for me, is powerful, and powerful things are often sexy. Thank you very much.